Hi everybody and welcome to Penfinity. My name is Wes72 and today it's the offline recording of the live stream because unfortunately I have some technical issue. So I will fix that during the weekend and I will notify you in the beginning of the next week. So now I'm just gonna do it offline. So depending of the length of the material creation, I will try to keep it really short and concise, but if it became too long, I'm just going to separate it to multiple parts to not bother you guys. Because the goal is to really, I try to make some really short and comprehensive tutorial for you to implement it right away. So this one's going to be much longer than the format I did habitually because it was a stream previously, initially, sorry. So yeah, let's start doing this. So give me just 1 second. Okay, so what we're gonna do today, we're gonna try to recreate this procedural deformation on the surface. So not maybe exactly what actually happened here, but try to have some what's the name? Some fractal texture to mimic as close as possible what's happened here. Because as you know, and as I already talk about in Dissect for Procedural, the third part was create, not replicate. And my goal is always that, try to understand what's happening. And after that, just try to do something on my own to see if the result I have seems to be in this example a handmade copper object. So yeah, so as you can see on this one, let me bring back, we have tons of details. We have those tiny details here, we have some details here like this. So we have this really funny one, you see, and yeah, we have some bigger but slightly bigger deformation. So when I start my procedural texturing, I always it's a universal principle of design. You have the bigger detail, the medium, and the tiny one. So that's exactly how I execute my procedural texturing. It allows me to keep everything manageable, try to make each step work before going into the other one. So that's really to me the way to go when you do procedural texturing. So for those who don't know me, let me represent myself a little bit. My name is Wes72. I'm a CG artist from Guadeloupe in the Caribbean. So I was doing CG since purely 3D since 2015 because I was formerly a graphic designer and I switched to 3D because this is what I wanted to do. But I was always I found it at the time too difficult at the time, but I told myself if I don't do it right now, I will never do it. So I just sat down, suffer a lot. I'm still suffering to learn, and okay, this is what I am today. I'm still have a lot of stuff to learn, man. That's really crazy. But yeah, it's I really enjoy it, and I just want to share with you. This is the goal of Penfinity. I want to share with you my process when I discover and exchange. Maybe we can find solution together and grow together. And I hope in the future I will be able to create a real platform with Penfinity where we will provide as really amazing content for you to learn, guys, because I know how hard it is. Even with the information we have right now, we have a lot of how to, but we don't have a lot of how to think, and that's the bigger problem I found when I start my 3D journey. I found a lot of tutorial on how to model a car and stuff like that, but why you create that handguns here, and the reason is when you're going to subdivide it, it will create that type of shape and stuff like that. So that's why what I try to implement into my tutorials. So enough talking, and let's start doing some stuff. So as we can see here, the material is highly reflective. The reason you can see the reflection is because of the deformation, but this material is really, really high reflective. Maybe near like chrome to me, but not a little bit diffused in that. So and yeah, quick word about chrome. Something I see a lot, and I don't recommend you to do, is this. When you create a chrome material, don't do this. Put it to multiscalar GGX. Don't do this. Chrome does not be, even the most beautiful manufactured chrome does not work like that. You're always going to have surface deformation at the microscopic level. Having the roughness at 0 here means the surface of the chrome, the molecule of the chrome is absolutely perfectly aligned. There is no crevices, there is nothing on the surface. And you know, it's never going to happen in real life. So the chrome will have, even the most clean one will have tiny surface deformation. And let me show you with some highlights. For example, this in real life is really less likely to happen. You always will have some tiny, even slightly tiny halo around the lights because of the surface imperfection. For example, and it will depend of many things. It will depend of if it is a real chrome material or if it is metal. For example, my microphone is made of metal with the chrome paints on it and a top shiny coat on top of it. So because of that combination, you have a tiny glow around the lights, and it becomes much more prominent at the crazing angle. And you will find that, of course, when you look at photograph sometimes, and you will not see this tiny halo because maybe of the resolution of the photo, or maybe especially on commercial product because the image is heavily retouched. So but in real life, look at chrome around you and take really the time to look at closely the chrome. You will see tiny surface deformation even on the cleanest one. So what I do generally is this. Whoops. I just do, oh, why doing that when I have this? Okay. So generally I will keep both in multiscalar GGX, but I will have a tiny value, even tinier than that, 0.01 on this one. So you will see it's really tiny. Even if you can barely see it, I just put it. And this one will be 0.5, and I will put that in 0.1, for example, to have that type of stuff here. And as you can see, I will have a tiny halo around. Let me increase, for example, to 500. And isolate this. Let's keep it running so we can see. And I will have something like this. Plus, I will put a Fresnel on top of it, of course, because everything has Fresnel. Where is it? So this is nothing but my custom Fresnel node, and I just had a glossy shader to directly have the top coats on it. And the reason why I still using this instead of the principal shader, because people ask me about that, is because the principal shader is really amazing for basic stuff, but advanced material creation, it fails on me many times, because on this I can let me show you with the value. As you know, I have the Fresnel here. I can manage the Fresnel here. Here is the intensity of the Fresnel, the specularity, and the influence manage the. Let me show you that. The energy conservation. I forgot to mention you. It's just as the surface become rough, the Fresnel will disappear. And here is the intensity of the overall effects. So I can reduce this to reduce the effect of all those slots here. And why I create this here is, for example, if let me show you with the material. Okay, let me create something like this. 1, 3. For example, the basic plastic like this. Remove. And I put the top coat on it. So for example, let me reduce the specularity of the plastic. I put it 72. And on some plastic, the Fresnel can be the spread can be high like this. On some plastic, you can really start to see at the grazing angle at this point to the edge, really high reflective surface. And let me put a tiny energy conservation on top of it. For example, like this. It's maybe too more. Okay. And for example, on plastic, the influence will be really low. So you will be able to see the shape of the reflection really sharp on plastic, but you're not going to be able to see exactly the details of the shape. What it of course here, if you know, let me zoom here. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe I can lower the for you to see it. You can barely see it. Let me increase for you to see. For example, okay, here you can see the outside of the shape. It is really sharp. You're not going to be able to see the detail like in a chrome material like this. You're not going to be able to see those details. But in plastic, the outside will be really sharp, but the intensity, the intensity of the effect of the top coats will be really low. So that's what happened basically in plastic. That's why in plastic you can kind of see yourself, but you don't see the detail of your eyes and stuff like that. Everything's still unrecognizable. So that's why I'm still using the custom Fresnel, because it allows me to really control every aspect of how the Fresnel behave, of how the specularity behave, and the energy conservation, etc. And I can plug texture on different texture on each option and give me the really close to life behavior of material, because Sometimes the Fresnel will be the effect of the Fresnel will be lower if you have some surface imperfection or something on top of it. So you have to take that in account because most of the time I see the Fresnel is applied. Maybe you have a bump map and stuff like that, but the bump map or the texture doesn't affect the power of the Fresnel sometimes, depending of the setup you find. So that's why I'm keep using this custom node. It gives me much more flexibilities. So of course, if something is not clear, just leave a comment. I will explain you that further, no problem. So let me remove this, and we're gonna create everything from scratch. Now I'm gonna put the color. So this one, I use this to color pick. I'm gonna show you what it is exactly. So I'm gonna keep this one to 0.3, 0.5, this one 0.5. Okay. Well, something much more. Chrome. Something like this. Maybe to. Sometimes I use a color pick, or sometimes I try to guesstimate as much as I can. Okay, so what it is exactly? This is a simple color node, and with a layer weight integrate in it, and the facing is take this color, darken it and desaturate it a little bit, so it works to me in 90% of the case. So I use that to just have color depth, because of some material you have that happening. So I use that to influence that, and just sometimes to trick the shader to give me maybe more depth or more realism. So let me put it for now 2.5 like this. Okay. You have, in this texture, you have different way to start. You can, of course, the secret of the procedural texturing is not to use as much different texture and blend them. Is sometimes you can obtain that result with maybe only the noise texture, but you have to manipulate it in a certain way to have that happen. So I try to keep the use of noise as minimal as possible. I try to not use a lot of them. So depending of course of the type of texture, you will have to experiment a lot. That's the downside of procedural texturing. That's the big downside of it. To me, in my opinion, with the tool we have in Blender, with all the nodes and the basic procedural texture we have, we can replicate almost 90% of what you see out there. The downside is it requires a lot of experiments. So depending on what you are working on, I try to build a procedural shader library, because my goal is to create design and mostly an illustration. And since I'm not planning to use Substance Painter or stuff like that, it's not my primary goal actually for now. So that's why I go down to the rabbit hole of procedural, and it gives you a great flexibility, because of course you don't have to have texture with you, but the downside maybe can be the render time, but this will become less and less factor to consider because of the power of the machine we have right now. So, bon, this machine is pretty slow right now because I have only a GTX 980, but my next machine will have four graphics cards, so I'm not gonna even care about it. It will run at the speed of light. So yeah, even if the texture become much more complicated with the power you have, it will reduce the render time, and you can trick the texture with the light path node, make it even go faster. So that's why I decided to go with procedural. So now what I'm gonna do, another thing, convention. When I mix multiple nodes together like this one, I just put everything on a line like this. And the convention is first slot, second slot, and mix shader. If I have a texture to plug here, I just plug it before like this. So it helps me to have everything organized, and I can after that align the texture who will affect the different nodes, and I can just read. It will allow you to have a really organized node setup, and you can read it easily. You will see where to go if you want to do modification, and that's really important. Procedurally or not, that's really important to have a pretty organized workflow. So I'm gonna start with the noise texture for now, and I'm gonna put the scale to 20. Oh, sorry for the noise. Okay. Put that 1.2 maybe. Let me put inverted cologram. So you're gonna see me fail live, offline, live, fortunately. So of course, when you create procedural texture, it's lots of try and error. You create some stuff, it doesn't work, you go back, you recreate stuff. So I'm gonna try to keep it as short as possible, but it's try and error. So something I advise you if you want to build a procedural texturing is first to spend time study the texture itself. Let me show you that. Let me show you. Oh, let me show you something really quick. I really need to change the GIMP logo. It looks so unprofessional. Let me remove that. Okay. Let me show you, for example, this. So here I do a frequency separation like I did in my previous video. For example, what I advise you to do is to study texture. Try to spend time to try to replicate, not necessarily all the texture, but for example, tiny dots like this, or effect the tiny shape like this, and try to create that procedurally, and you will have a database of tiny procedural nodes you will be able to mix together to see how close can you be from the texture you want to replicate. And to me, that's the secret. It's really to try to isolate some tiny effect. For example, you have this shape here, but you have some dark parts at the corner. So how can you replicate just that in Blender? And when you found it, you put it into a shader or node group or whatever, and you can recall it after, mix them with mix factor on matte node, and you will be able to create some really interesting stuff. Nope. Okay, so let's see what we have now. So I'm going to use bump. Let me see what I have. So it is too high. So let me that here. This here. Okay. So now I just try to integrate some of the bigger deformation. So now it's maybe too high, 0.05. This is too low. Yeah. Gonna start with that because I have some big deformation here. Try to keep it random like this. You have to start somewhere, so don't just start and you add details and you think along the way how you can pull it off. I'm gonna keep it to 1 for now. Seems to work well. Another thing, do it as you go. I just plug on the scale, copy and paste this here, and this I put it to 1. And to multiply and plug this here. The reason is, let me put the value node to 1 and plug this here. Why I do this is because when you're gonna procedurally or not, is the same principle. If you have multiple texture, and you want to, the goal is to build a database of material, but this material maybe will be applied on maybe tiny object or bigger ones. So you're not going to go over, if you have, for example, 5 procedural texturing, a texture, you're not going to go over each of them to change the scale. So the thing is, I put a value, even if I can modify this, but I prefer to let that as it is, especially when I use my custom point mapping node. I put a multiplicative factor here, and I can just increase it if the scale is too low, or decrease it if it's too high. So I don't have to go over all the procedural texture. So I have this. Now let's add if I might put, no, this is a mouse grain Voronoi. Let's have a Voronoi texture. So as you can see, I try to put all the procedural on the same column to keep everything work perfectly. So let me duplicate this. Oh, made a mistake. Plug that here. And plug that here. Oh, it's too close. Okay, let me plug this here and see what we have. Okay. 0.5, yeah. 0.5. Oh, another thing. I work only with in procedural with object. That's really important. So because of that, let me see. Yep. The scale is not enough. No, it's too high. So to better see the deformation, I use the highlight, the light panel here. Allows me to see deformation here. Okay, I'm going to keep it that way for now. Another thing, you have different ways to use the bump map. You can either create, for example, let me show you. you can have, what is this? Is this one? I don't remember. Oh, that's crazy. Since I update to Blender 2.79, I Blender froze for no reason. I don't know what's going on. As you can see, it start and stop. Give me a second. Okay. Oh, it started. It stopped again. It stops again. Okay. What is going on? What is going on? My goodness. Okay, so for example, as you can see, you have a different way to use the bump node. Either you create the procedural texture entirely, and after that you just plug it into the bump node to have and play with the bump. Either you separate, like I do most of the time, I separate the big details, the medium details, and the tiny details into 3 different bumps. Because sometimes you have different type of depth into the texture, and I want to be able to manage that independently. I found it gives me a much more control and realism at the end. So